Blair always treated me like background noise, but I never thought she would pay $12,000 just to ensure I stayed that way. She hired a consultant to prove I was a nobody, a dull shadow best forgotten. It was a fatal calculation, because the $3 million silent partner funding her empire wasn't a stranger. It was the sister she had just tried to erase, and I was finished being quiet. My life was built on the architecture of the unobserved. I was 33 years old, and I had spent the last decade perfecting the art of being essential but invisible. I worked in compliance operations for a healthcare logistics firm, a job that sounded tedious to anyone who did not understand the quiet, thrumming power of keeping a massive machine from breaking the law. I liked the rules. I liked the black and white certainty of a well-audited ledger. I liked that when I did my job perfectly, nobody said my name. In my line of work, visibility was usually a precursor to a subpoena. I lived in a mid-sized city that was neither decaying nor booming, just steady, much like me. My apartment was a third-floor walk-up with good light and better soundproofing, filled with books I had actually read and plants I had managed to keep alive for more than a season. It was a life of small, curated dignities. Then my phone buzzed on a Tuesday afternoon. It was my mother. "We are having a small dinner on Friday." She wrote, "Just family. Come over around 7. There was no question mark. The Baileys did not ask. They summoned. I texted back a simple affirmative, assuming it was a birthday I had forgotten, or perhaps an anniversary. I did not ask for details because details were usually withheld to ensure attendance. If I knew it was going to be a coronation for my sister, I might have claimed a migraine. I arrived at my parents' house at 7 sharp. The house was a sprawling colonial in a neighborhood that valued lawn maintenance over neighborliness. As I parked my 10-year-old sedan behind my father's pristine SUV, I saw a familiar sleek black convertible in the driveway. Blair was here. Blair was 29, 4 years younger and a lifetime louder. She was the founder of a lifestyle and wellness startup called Luminosity, a company that sold apps and supplements designed to optimize the human experience. Blair had never optimized anything in her life other than her own image, but she was charismatic in a way that made people want to hand her their credit cards. She collected attention the way some people collected stamps, pressing it into books to keep for later. I walked up the driveway, clutching a bottle of Pinot Noir and a first edition of a poetry collection I had found at an estate sale. I thought it would be a nice gesture, something quiet and thoughtful. When I opened the front door, the noise hit me. It was not a small dinner. There were at least 15 people in the foyer and living room. My parents were there, obviously, but so were the Parkers from down the street, a few of my father's golf friends, and a handful of people I didn't recognize who looked like they had been cast in a commercial for expensive dental work. "Sadie!" my mother cried out, spotting me. She was wearing a dress that cost more than my first car. "You made it. Grab a drink. Darling, we are just toasting." "Toasting what?" I asked, feeling underdressed in my work slacks and a sensible blouse. "Blair's Series A," my mother said, her eyes widening as if I had failed a test. The funding round closed. "It is official." I looked across the room. Blair was standing by the fireplace, holding a flute of champagne. She looked radiant, professionally polished, and utterly dominant. She was telling a story, using her hands to punctuate the air, and 6 people were leaning in, rapt. I set my gift on the entry table. It vanished instantly into the clutter of expensive floral arrangements. I was not a guest here. I was scenery. I navigated the room, nodding at people who looked through me. I found a glass of white wine and retreated to the edge of the living room. I watched my sister work the room. She was good at it. I had to admit, she had a way of making eye contact that made the recipient feel like the only person in the world. Right before she looked over their shoulder to see if someone more important had arrived, dinner was announced, and we moved to the long dining room table. My mother had set places with name cards. I walked the length of the table, looking for my name. I found it at the very end, next to the kitchen door. Seated beside a cousin's husband who I knew for a fact had not read a book since high school. Blair, of course, was at the center, flanked by our father and a man named Gerald Henderson, a longtime family friend and a retired investment banker. The conversation was a monologue disguised as a discussion. Blair held court, recounting the grueling negotiations with venture capitalists, painting herself as a warrior poet of the boardroom. "They told me the market was saturated," Blair said, her voice carrying effortlessly to the cheap seats where I sat. "They said wellness is dead, and I looked them in the eye and said, wellness isn't a product, it is a survival strategy." And that is when they opened the checkbook. Applause. Literal applause broke out at the table. My father beamed, his face flushed with pride. "That is my girl," he said. "A shark. A total shark." I focused on cutting my chicken. I was happy for her. In the abstract way one is happy for a sports team one does not follow. But the air in the room felt thin, sucked up by the sheer gravitational pull of her ego. Then, the pivot happened. It always happened. Blair could not just win. She had to define her win by contrasting it with someone else's loss. "You know," Blair said, leaning back and swirling her wine, "I think growing up with Sadie actually helped me." I froze. I did not look up, but I felt the table's attention shift slightly toward me. "How so?" asked Mrs. Parker. "Well, Sadie is so safe," Blair said, smiling at me. "It is sweet, really. She is the Bailey who never took risks. She showed me exactly what life looks like when you color inside the lines. It made me realize I had to burn the coloring book." Laughter. It rippled around the table. My parents laughed the loudest. That booming, performative laughter that signaled to everyone else that this was good-natured ribbing and not public humiliation. I looked up. I forced a smile. It was the price of admission to this family. You had to eat the insult to get the dessert. "I suppose someone has to make sure the taxes get paid," I said, keeping my voice light. "Oh, stop," Blair said, dismissing me with a wave of her hand. "You love it. You love your little cubicle and your forms. It is who you are, the steady one, the invisible hand. The invisible hand, that stung." Gerald Henderson, the retired banker, cleared his throat. He was a serious man, one of the few people at the table who actually understood how businesses were built, not just how they were pitched. He looked at Blair, then down the table at me. "Actually," Gerald said, his voice cutting through the laughter, "I was looking at your prospectus. Blair, the compliance structuring is surprisingly robust for a startup. Is Sadie the one with the finance brain who helped you with that? I know she does high-level regulatory work." The table went quiet. It was a direct validation of my competence, and it came from the most important person in the room. Gerald was implying that my credibility might be the reason the investors felt safe. Blair's smile didn't vanish, but it tightened. It became a rictus, a mask of teeth. Her eyes flicked to me, cold and assessing. "Sadie?" Blair laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "God. No. Sadie hasn't seen a single page of my business plan. Investors don't want compliance. Gerald, they want vision. Sadie is, well, she is great at what she does, but she is hardly startup material. She is the background check, not the CEO." She pivoted the conversation back to herself immediately, launching into a story about a retreat in Bali, but the energy had shifted. She had been pricked. Someone had suggested that her success might not be entirely solitary, that the boring sister might have a value that eclipsed her own. I finished my wine in one swallow. Later that night, the party began to break up. Guests were lingering in the foyer, putting on coats. I was in the kitchen, helping the caterers stack plates because I felt more kinship with the staff than the guests. "Sadie." I turned. Blair was standing in the doorway. The performative warmth was gone. She looked tired and mean. "You should go," she said. "I am just helping clean up." I said, "Stop it," she snapped. "You are doing that thing you do, acting like the martyr. Look at me, scrubbing the dishes while the princess parties. It is pathetic." I put down a stack of dessert plates. I am literally just stacking plates. "Blair, not everything is a narrative." She walked into the kitchen, closing the door behind her. The sounds of the party muffled instantly. She leaned against the granite island. Crossing her arms, "Gerald was asking about you." She said, "I heard, do not get ideas." "Sadie," I laughed. A short, humorless sound. "What ideas?" "Blair, you think I want to work for you? I have a job. A real one. You are a liability." She said. The word hung in the air. Liability. It was a word from my world, not hers. "Excuse me?" I asked. "Investors ask questions," she said. "They look at the family. They look at where I come from. And they see you. 33, unmarried, mid-level job, living in that sad apartment. You look like failure. Sadie, you look like the kind of person who asks for loans. You look like risk." I stared at her. The cruelty was breathtaking. "I am your sister. I have a 401k and a cat. I am not a risk. I fixed it. Though," she said. She reached into her purse and pulled out a compact, checking her lipstick. "I hired a consultant. Brand protection. I don't know what that means." I said, "It means I paid a firm $12,000 to scrub the connection," she said casually, snapping the compact shut. "They are creating a firewall between my brand and your existence. They are running a full suppression campaign, making sure that if anyone looks for the Bailey family, they find me, and if they dig deep enough to find you, they find proof that you are nobody, just a boring shadow." I felt a coldness spread through my chest. "You paid $12,000 to hide me?" "To prove you are irrelevant," she corrected. "It is standard. Don't take it personally. I just need to make sure no one thinks your mediocrity is genetic." She smiled then, a flash of white teeth that didn't reach her eyes. It was worth every penny. Honestly. "Now, get out of my kitchen. I have investors to charm." She turned and walked out, leaving the door swinging on its hinges. I stood there, my hands gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned white. It wasn't the insult that made me shake. It was the specific, calculated nature of the action. $12,000. She had quantified my worthlessness. She had put a price tag on my erasure. I left without saying goodbye to anyone. The fallout started 4 days later. I walked into my office on Wednesday morning, coffee in hand, ready to review a stack of vendor audits. My keycard worked, but the light on the scanner took a split second longer than usual to turn green. I didn't think anything of it. I sat at my desk and logged in. An hour later, a calendar invite popped up. Meeting, HR/compliance update. Attendees, Sadie Bailey, Marcus Wren, HR Director. My stomach dropped. Marcus didn't do updates. Marcus did firings and layoffs. I walked into his office at 10. Marcus looked uncomfortable. He gestured for me to sit. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Sadie, we received a notification from our background check vendor," Marcus said. He didn't look me in the eye. "Apparently, there was a flag on your initial education verification from 10 years ago, a discrepancy in your transcript dates." I frowned. "That is impossible. I have been here for 5 years. You vetted me when I started." "I know," Marcus said, "but we are undergoing a third-party risk audit. Someone external flagged it. We have to run a re-verification. It is just procedural. But, well, until it clears, we have to restrict your access to the sensitive client databases." Restrict my access? I felt the blood drain from my face. I can't do my job without that access. "I know," Marcus said again. He looked pained. "Look, Sadie, between us, it is weird. We got an anonymous tip through the ethics hotline too. Something about undisclosed conflicts of interest with a startup. Blair. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The brand protection consultant wasn't just hiding me from Google results. They were actively seeding chaos to devalue me. If I looked unstable, if I had employment issues, if I was under investigation, then I wasn't a credible witness to Blair's life. I was just the messy sister. I stared at Marcus. "Who sent the tip?" "It is anonymous. Sadie, you know the policy." I walked back to my desk, my legs feeling like lead. My computer screen was already locked out of the shared drive. I sat there, surrounded by the work I was good at, the work I was proud of. And I couldn't touch it. I saw a colleague, David, walking past. We usually grabbed lunch on Wednesdays. "Hey, David," I said. He glanced at me, then looked away quickly, checking his phone. "Hey, Sadie. Super busy today. Catch you later." He kept walking. The rumor mill was faster than fiber optics. I was radioactive. I left work early, claiming illness. I sat in my car in the parking lot, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I called my parents. My mother answered on the third ring. "Hello? Blair is trying to get me fired." I said, "I didn't say hello. I didn't ask how she was." "Sadie, don't be dramatic." My mother sighed. I could hear the television in the background. She paid a consultant to dig into my background. "Mom," she told me, "and now HR is investigating me for things that aren't true. She is torpedoing my career to make herself look better." There was a pause. Then my father's voice came on the line. He must have been listening on speaker. "Sadie, listen to me," he said, his voice stern. "Blair is under a lot of pressure right now. This startup is a massive undertaking. Sometimes, in business, you have to do deep diligence." "Diligence?" I nearly screamed. "She is planting lies about me." "She is protecting her asset," my father said. "And honestly, Sadie, this jealousy is unbecoming." "Jealousy? You have always been a little resentful of Blair's shine." My mother added, "Just let her have her moment. If your job is solid, you have nothing to worry about. Stop making this about you." They hung up. The silence in the car was deafening. It wasn't just dismissal. It was betrayal. They knew. They knew what she was doing. Or at least they suspected, and they didn't care. Blair was the investment. I was the sunk cost. I drove home in a daze. I felt hollowed out. I had spent my life trying to be the good one, the low-maintenance one, the one who didn't cause problems, and it had earned me absolutely nothing. I sat on my couch in the dark, staring at the wall. My phone buzzed. It was Jules, my best friend since college. She was the only person outside the family who really knew the dynamics. "Jules, hey, I saw Blair's press release. Want me to come over and throw darts at her picture?" I called her. I told her everything. The dinner, the $12,000, the HR meeting, the parents. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I was in a state of cold, vibrating shock. When I finished, Jules was quiet for a long time. "Sadie," she said finally, "you are missing the headline." "What?" "The money," Jules said. "You said Blair bragged about a silent partner. $3.2 million. Yeah. So? Sadie, Blair is a control freak. You know that. She micromanages her Instagram captions. She doesn't take money from strangers unless she thinks she can control them." I rubbed my temples. "I don't care about her money. Jules, I care that she is destroying my life." "No, listen to me," Jules insisted. "Blair has been obsessed with credibility lately. She paid $12,000 to erase you because she thinks you damage her credibility. But she is taking money from a silent partner? That is the ultimate credibility risk. If she doesn't know exactly who that money is, she wouldn't take it. Or, she thinks she knows, and she is wrong." I sat up straighter. "Jules worked in forensic accounting. She saw patterns I missed." "What are you saying?" I asked. "I am saying that Blair is terrified of where credibility comes from." Jules said, "And she just declared war on the one person who knows all her secrets. Sadie, stop being the victim. You are the compliance officer. Do what you do. Audit her." I hung up the phone. I sat there for another hour, watching the streetlights flicker outside my window. I thought about the risk checks. I thought about the $12,000. I thought about my father calling me jealous. I thought about the way Blair looked at me in the kitchen, like I was a smudge on a window she was trying to clean. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg my parents to love me. And I certainly wasn't going to be the bigger person. The bigger person was just a larger target. I stood up and walked to my desk. I opened my laptop. I created a new folder. I named it Project Silence. I started with the dates, the date of the dinner, the date of the HR meeting. I wrote down the conversation in the kitchen verbatim. I logged the time of the call with my parents. Then I opened my browser. I didn't look at Blair's Instagram. I looked for the press release about the funding. Luminosity secures $3,200,000 in strategic capital from undisclosed private trust. Undisclosed private trust. I stared at the words. I worked in compliance. I knew that undisclosed was just a word for people didn't look hard enough. I wasn't nobody. I was the person who read the fine print. And for the first time in my life, I was going to write some of it. I saved the document. I closed the laptop. The silence in the apartment didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like waiting. I treated the background check request like a subpoena. In my line of work, you learned that the truth was rarely in the summary. It was in the metadata, the timestamps, and the vendor codes. I sat at my kitchen table on Thursday night, the glow of my laptop screen the only light in the room, and logged into the consumer reporting portal. Under federal law, I was entitled to know who had asked about me. It was a dry bureaucratic right. But right now, it was the only weapon I had. I requested the full disclosure file. Every inquiry, every verification attempt, every database ping attached to my social security number in the last 6 months. When the PDF generated, it was 40 pages long. Most of it was standard. My credit card company doing a soft pull. My landlord verifying my lease renewal. But on page 32, there was a cluster of activity that made my compliance brain itch. Inquiry type: Investigative Consumer Report / Character Reputation Assessment. Requester: Argus Risk Solutions. Client ref. Third party / ext. Diligence. I stared at the screen. My employer used a company called VeriSafe for standard checks. Argus Risk Solutions was different. It was aggressive. It was the kind of firm you hired when you wanted to find dirt, not just verify a degree. And the code next to it, ext. Diligence, was usually reserved for executive hires or high-stakes partnerships. I was a mid-level operations manager. Nobody spent this kind of money vetting me unless they were trying to build a case against me. The next morning, I cornered Ben, a junior analyst in our HR department. Ben was young, eager to please, and owed me a favor for helping him navigate a messy payroll audit the previous quarter. I caught him in the break room while the coffee machine was groaning through its cycle. "Ben," I said, keeping my voice low, hypothetically, "if we saw an inquiry from Argus Risk Solutions on an employee file, what would that trigger?" Ben frowned, stirring sugar into his cup. "Argus? We do not use them. They are expensive. Usually, that is for, well, it is for hostile stuff. Like if we are acquiring a company and want to know if the CFO has a gambling problem." I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. And if the inquiry code was for third-party diligence? He looked at me, confused. That looks like investor-level vetting, or maybe litigation prep. Why? Did you see that on a file? I forced a smile. Just seeing some weird chatter on a forum, curious about the codes. Ben shrugged. If I saw that, I would assume someone is trying to prove the person is a liability, like radioactive. You do not run that check unless you expect to find something that kills a deal. I walked back to my desk, my heart hammering a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. A liability. That was the word Blair had used in the kitchen. Investors look at the family. You are a liability. She wasn't just hiding me. She was actively building a dossier to prove that I was too risky to be associated with. She was manufacturing a paper trail that painted me as unstable. The sister with the issues, so that if anyone ever asked why I wasn't on the board or in the photos, she could pull out a file and say, "We had to distance ourselves. For the good of the company, it was brilliant, it was sociopathic, and it was working." That evening, my boyfriend, Mark, found me organizing receipts on the living room floor. I had categorized them by year. Then by vendor, I was hyperventilating, just slightly, between staples. "Sadie," Mark said, standing over me, "you have been reorganizing the filing cabinet for 3 hours. The takeout is cold. I need to find my employment contracts from 2018, I said, not looking up. "And my performance reviews. I need to prove that there were no gaps." "Prove to whom?" Mark asked. He crouched down, putting a hand on my shoulder. His hand felt heavy, trapping me. Sadie, stop. You are spiraling. I am not spiraling. I snapped, pulling away. I am auditing. There is a difference. He sat back on his heels, looking tired. We had been together for 2 years. He was a good man, a high school history teacher who loved that I was organized and dependable, but he didn't understand the violence of what was happening. To him, this was just family drama. He didn't see the mechanics of it. You are letting her do this, Mark said gently. Blair is in your head. You are acting manic. Sadie, you are obsessing over paperwork because your sister said something mean at a party. It isn't just mean. Mark, I shouted, the volume of my own voice startling me. She is editing me. Don't you get it? It feels like someone is walking through the library of my life and ripping pages out, or writing notes in the margins that say I am crazy. If I don't have the original documents, her version becomes the truth. Mark stood up, rubbing his face. I can't do this tonight. Sadie, I can't watch you tear yourself apart over people who treat you like garbage. You are obsessed with controlling this, but you are just hurting yourself. He went to the bedroom and closed the door. I sat alone on the floor, surrounded by piles of tax returns and pay stubs. He was right. I was obsessed. But he was wrong about the motive. I wasn't trying to control the family. I was trying to keep from vanishing. I turned back to the box of papers I had pulled from the top of the closet. It was my keepsake box, a sentimental label for a container of things I couldn't bear to throw away but rarely looked at. I sifted through the layers: high school diploma, a dried corsage, and at the bottom, a thick cream-colored envelope, my grandfather's handwriting. Grandpa Bailey had been the only person in the family who didn't look at me and see a supporting character. He had died when I was 22. He was a quiet man, a former actuary who liked silence as much as I did. I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter he had written to me when I graduated college, and a copy of a trust document I hadn't looked at in a decade. My dearest Sadie, the letter read, You have a spine of steel. Even if you wrap it in velvet, the world, and perhaps this family, will ask you to bend. They will ask you to give pieces of yourself to patch their holes. Do not do it. I have set up this trust not to make you rich, but to keep your future unborrowable. It is yours. It answers only to you. Let it be the wall they cannot climb. Unborrowable. I traced the word with my thumb. He knew. Even back then, he knew that my parents and Blair viewed me as a resource to be mined, not a person to be nurtured. I unfolded the trust document. The legalese was dense, but 10 years in compliance had made me fluent in fine print. The Sadie Bailey Irrevocable Trust. Trustee, Sterling Vance Fiduciary Services. I remembered the meetings vaguely. I was 22, grieving and overwhelmed. I remembered signing papers. I remembered Grandpa had put $50,000 into it, a fortune to me then, but not wealth by Bailey standards. Over the years, I had set up an automatic transfer from my paycheck, $200 a month, every month, for 11 years. I treated it like a black hole. I never checked the balance. I never asked how it was invested. It was my secret safety net, the money I would use if I ever had to run away. I looked at the investment clause, assets to be managed in the Northlake Growth Strategy Pool. I grabbed my phone. It was too late to call, but I saved the number for Sterling Vance. The next morning, I took an early lunch break and sat in my car. I dialed the number. Sterling and Vance. A receptionist answered. I navigated the verification process. Name, social, trust number. Finally, I was connected to a Mr. Vance, not the original Vance, probably a son or grandson. He sounded young, crisp, and professional. Ms. Bailey, he said. We haven't heard from you in quite some time. We send the quarterly statements to the P.O. box on file, but we rarely see a login. I keep the statements filed. I lied. I just wanted to do a review. I realized I haven't looked at the underlying allocation in years. Of course, Vance said. I can pull that up. You are currently fully deployed in the North Lake Growth Fund. It is a private investment vehicle we run for our trust clients. It pools capital to act as a limited partner in various ventures, mostly mid-market private equity, some venture capital. And the balance? I asked. There was the clicking of a keyboard. Well, the fund has performed exceptionally well over the last decade, Vance said. Between the initial principal, your monthly contributions, and the compound growth. Let me see. Your current beneficiary value is sitting at just under $340,000. I stopped breathing for a second. $340,000. It wasn't buy an island money, but it was walk away from a job money. It was freedom. And this fund, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, the North Lake Growth Fund, it invests in startups? Yes, Vance said. We act as a silent partner. Essentially, we come in as a limited partner in larger rounds. We like steady operators, but we have had some home runs in the tech and wellness sectors recently. Wellness sectors. My skin went cold. Do I have any say in where the money goes? I asked. Vance chuckled politely. Not on a line-item basis. No, that is the beauty of the pooled structure. You get the leverage of a massive fund without the headache of diligence. But as a beneficiary, you do have rights. You receive the annual audits. And you have a vote on ethical compliance matters if a portfolio company violates the fund's charter. It is a safeguard we put in place to ensure our clients' money isn't funding, well, things they wouldn't approve of. I thanked him and hung up. I sat in the silence of my car. I had rights. I had a vote on ethical compliance. I drove back to the office, but I couldn't focus. I put on my headphones and, against my better judgment, I searched for the podcast Blair had mentioned at dinner, The Founder's Grind. I found the episode. It had dropped 2 days ago. I pressed play. Blair's voice filled my ears, warm, confident, and utterly fake. She was telling the host about the early days of Luminosity. People think it was easy, Blair was saying. They see the success now and think I had it handed to me. But I had to fight for every inch. My own family didn't get it. I had people close to me telling me to play it safe, to get a normal job. That must have been hard. The host said, it was toxic. Blair said, honestly, I had to do some pruning. You can't fly if you are carrying dead weight. I had to cut ties with the people who wanted me to be small. I stared at my monitor. Dead weight. She was talking about me. She was broadcasting my erasure to thousands of listeners. But then, Blair continued, her voice brightening, I found partners who actually saw the vision. We have a silent partner. I can't name them, obviously, but they came in with over $3 million. They believed in me from day one. They looked at the risks and said, we bet on the jockey, not the horse. That validation meant more than the money. I paused the podcast. I felt physically ill. She was bragging about the silent partner. She was using their belief in her to validate her decision to cut me off. They believed in me from day one. I thought about the North Lake Growth Fund. I thought about the wellness sector wins Mr. Vance had mentioned. It was a stretch. It had to be a coincidence. There were thousands of funds, thousands of startups, but the universe had a dark sense of humor. And my grandfather had been a man who believed in protecting the future. I needed to know more about how to fight a war without weapons. 2 nights later, I forced myself to attend a networking mixer for women in finance and law at a downtown hotel. I hated these events, the frantic exchange of business cards, the desperate eye contact, but I needed advice, and I couldn't ask anyone who knew my name. I nursed a club soda near a high-top table, watching the room. I spotted a man standing near the bar, looking as out of place as I felt. He was older, maybe 60, wearing a suit that was expensive but 10 years out of style. He was watching the crowd with a look of amused detachment. I walked over. You look like you would rather be doing a root canal, I said. He looked at me, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Root canal might be ambitious. I was thinking more like tax preparation. I am Sadie, I said. Arthur, he replied. Arthur Keene, contract law, compliance. I said. Ah, he nodded. The people who say no, So the people who say yes don't go to jail. Something like that. We talked for a few minutes about the industry. Arthur was sharp, cynical, and clearly experienced. He wasn't trying to sell me anything. "Can I ask you a hypothetical?" I said. After a pause, Arthur took a sip of his drink. Lawyers love hypotheticals. It is the only time we can give advice without charging $400 an hour. Hypothetically, I said, if someone were dealing with a family member who was weaponizing their professional network to damage the person's employment, hiring vendors to run aggressive background checks, spreading rumors of instability, what is the move? Arthur looked at me. The amusement vanished from his face. He set his glass down. "Is this family member wealthy?" "New wealth," I said. "Startup wealth." "And the victim?" "Just a compliance officer." Arthur sighed. He leaned in slightly. "Listen to me carefully. Do not scream. Do not make a scene at Thanksgiving. Do not send angry text messages. Emotion is the enemy. In a situation like that, the person with the money assumes they can buy the narrative. They think they can outshout you. So what do? You become a bureaucrat," Arthur said. "You become the most boring, tedious nightmare they have ever encountered. The cleanest power move is always paper. You document everything. You request the vendor logs. You file the data access requests. You build a timeline that is so factual, so undeniable, that when you finally drop it on a desk, it acts like a guillotine." He handed me a card. "Start a log," he said. "Dates, times, names, and if they are messing with your employment, that is tortious interference. But you can't prove it with feelings. You prove it with timestamps." I took the card. "Thank you, Arthur." He nodded. "Good luck, Sadie. And remember, nobody expects the compliance officer to bite back. That is your advantage." I went home and went to war. But it was a quiet war, a war of forms and emails. I started the next morning. First, I filed a formal written request with HR for a vendor audit of recent inquiries. I cited the Fair Credit Reporting Act and my rights as an employee to understand the adverse action implied by the background re-verification. I kept the language sterile. I didn't mention Blair. I simply asked, "What triggered this inquiry? And can you provide the scope of work for the vendor Argus Risk Solutions?" Then, I went to the state's data privacy portal. I filed a subject access request with Argus Risk Solutions. I wanted to know who hired them, what they were asked to look for, and what data they held on me. Finally, I logged into my company's ethics portal. I filed a concern regarding external influence. I wrote that I had reason to believe a third party was attempting to influence internal risk assessments for personal reasons. I didn't name Blair. I just established the record. I am aware of the attempt to discredit me. It felt good. It felt like tightening a bolt. My boyfriend, Mark, watched me type. He didn't say anything, but he looked sad. He saw me hardening, calcifying into something sharper than the woman he loved. He didn't understand that I was doing this so I could eventually be soft again. You can't be soft when you are being hunted. A week passed. The silence from the other side was deafening. My parents didn't call. Blair didn't post anything about me. They thought I was beaten. They thought I was sitting in my corner, ashamed of my instability. Then, the phone rang. It was Mr. Vance from Sterling Vance. "Mrs. Bailey," he said, "I am glad I caught you." "Is something wrong with the account?" I asked, putting down my pen. "No, not at all," Vance said. "But per our fiduciary duty, I wanted to alert you to a potential material event regarding the North Lake Growth Fund. We are preparing for a proxy vote among the beneficiaries regarding one of our largest portfolio positions." "A vote?" I asked. "What kind of vote?" "Well, there have been some governance concerns raised about the leadership of the portfolio company," Vance said. "And since the fund holds a significant silent position, about $3.2 million, we need to decide if we are going to exercise our rights to freeze capital or demand a board audit." My heart stopped. $3.2 million. "What is the company?" I asked. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from across the room. "It is a lifestyle and wellness brand. Vance said casually. Quite popular. It is called luminosity. The world tilted. Luminosity. My grandfather's money, my savings, my unborrowable future. It was sitting in a pool that was fueling Blair's ego. I was the silent partner. I was the dead weight she had cut loose, and I was also the financial bedrock she was standing on. I gripped the phone. Mr. Vance, I said, send me the materials. I want to see everything. I hung up. I sat in my office chair, staring at the gray fabric of the cubicle wall. Blair had paid $12,000 to prove I was nobody. She had no idea that nobody owned the mortgage on her dreams. The PDF file on my screen was titled Northlake Growth Fund 4, Quarterly Limited Partner Report. It was 90 pages of dense, justified text, the kind of document designed to make your eyes glaze over so you would skip to the bolded numbers at the bottom. But I did not skip. I read it with the forensic intensity of a bomb disposal technician. I traced the money. It was a layered structure, a Russian nesting doll of capital. My grandfather's trust was a beneficiary of the Northlake pool. Northlake, in turn, acted as a limited partner, an LP, in a smaller, sector-specific venture vehicle called Aura Strategic Ventures. And on page 42, listed under Portfolio Highlights/Wellness Consumer Tech, was the name that made my pulse hammer against my throat. Luminosity. Investment rationale. High growth potential in the personal optimization market. Founder-led brand with strong narrative traction. Aura Strategic Ventures leads the Series A with a $3,200,000 injection. I sat back in my chair, the silence of my apartment pressing in on me. Blair did not know. She knew she had taken money from Aura Strategic Ventures. She probably knew Aura was backed by larger institutional pools like Northlake, but she did not know that the granular, atomic weight of that money, the actual dollars fueling her marketing campaigns and her office lease, came, in part, from the sister she was currently spending $12,000 to erase. It was a divine, terrifying irony. Blair was burning bridges while standing on a foundation I helped pour. I saved the document to my encrypted drive, the one I had labeled Project Silence. I was not ready to pull the lever yet. I needed to understand the mechanism. If I was the money, I needed to know what rules the money had to follow. 2 days later, Blair texted me. Blair, coffee? I feel like we got off on the wrong foot at dinner. My treat. The Percival at 2 p.m.? The Percival was a coffee shop that served $9 lattes and had lighting designed for Instagram stories. It was neutral ground, or so she wanted me to think. I arrived 5 minutes early. I wore my work clothes, a charcoal blazer and slacks, armor against her inevitable critique of my aesthetic. Blair arrived 10 minutes late, wearing oversized sunglasses and a cashmere sweater that looked effortlessly draped, but probably took 20 minutes to style. Sadie, she exclaimed, air-kissing my cheek. You look rested. Work is good? Work is fine, I said, taking my seat. She ordered for us without asking what I wanted, getting me a matcha latte because she insisted dairy caused inflammation. She spent the first 20 minutes talking about the stress of the fundraise, the demands of the board, and the burden of being a visionary. I let her talk. I was listening for the cracks. Finally, she set her cup down and sighed. A perfect, practiced exhale. Look, Sadie, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I wanted to talk about the other night, the whole consultant thing. I took a sip of the grassy, lukewarm latte. You mean the part where you paid someone to investigate me? Blair winced. See, that is what I mean. You are taking it so personally. In business, we call it risk containment. It is not about you as a person. It is about the narrative. I am a person. Blair, not a plot hole. She reached into her oversized tote bag. I know, and I want to protect you. Really, the media is going to start digging soon. They are ruthless. If they find out you are, well, living a very different life, they might spin it. They might harass you. She slid a thin blue folder across the marble table. So, legal drew this up, she said casually. It is just a standard family privacy agreement. Basically, it says we agree not to discuss each other's business details with third parties. It protects you as much as it protects me. I opened the folder. It was a non-disclosure agreement. I scanned the clauses. It was not mutual. It was unilateral. The undersigned, Sadie Bailey, agrees to refrain from making any public statements, written or verbal, regarding the founder, Blair Bailey, or Luminosity. The undersigned agrees to liquidated damages in the amount of $50,000 per breach. The undersigned acknowledges that they hold no advisory or influence role in the company. I looked up. Blair was watching me, her eyes wide and innocent, like a trap waiting to snap shut. "You want me to sign an NDA to talk to my own sister?" I asked. "It is just for family protection." Blair said, "It is standard. It says I owe you $50,000 if I tell someone you were mean to me in high school." I said, "You are being dramatic," Blair said, her voice hardening. "It is just to make sure we are on the same page. I have investors who are very particular about leaks. And honestly, Sadie, you have been acting unstable lately." "Unstable?" "The paranoia, the way you reacted at dinner, the fact that you are auditing me in your head right now. It makes people nervous. I just need a signature so I can tell the board that the family front is unified." I closed the folder and slid it back to her. "No," I said. Blair blinked. "Excuse me?" "I am not signing it. Blair, I am not signing away my right to speak about my own life, and I am certainly not agreeing to pay you $50,000 for the privilege of being your sister." Her face changed. The mask slipped, revealing the panic underneath. "Sadie, sign the damn paper." "No." She leaned in, her knuckles white as she gripped the table edge. "You do not understand. They keep asking." "Who?" I asked. "The investors," she hissed. "The lead partners. They keep asking about the family values angle. I pitched the brand as being rooted in authenticity and connection. They want to know why there is a sister who is never mentioned. They want to know if there is a skeleton in the closet. If I can show them a signed NDA. It proves you are just private, not a disaster. It proves you are handled. I am not a crisis to be handled." "Blair, you are if you don't sign this," she snapped. "If you ruin this for me." "Sadie, I swear to God, I will make sure you never work in this town again. I have resources you can't even dream of." I looked at her. I looked at the fear behind the threat. She was terrified. She had taken millions of dollars based on a story of perfection, and I was the loose thread that could unravel the whole tapestry. I stood up. "I think we are done. Blair." I walked out of the coffee shop, leaving the matcha latte untouched. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. I was shaking because I had just realized something important. Blair wasn't fighting me because she was strong. She was fighting me because she was weak. The pressure campaign escalated the next day. I was at home, eating a salad over the sink, when my father let himself in. He had a key for emergencies, a relic from when I had surgery 3 years ago. "Dad?" I said, startled. He stood in my small living room, looking too large for the space. He was wearing his golf jacket, his face set in a grimace of disappointment. "Your mother is crying," he said. He didn't say hello. "Why?" I asked. "Blair called us. She said you are refusing to help the family. She said you walked out on her." "I refused to sign a legal gag order." "Dad, there is a difference." He waved his hand dismissively. "It is a piece of paper. Sadie, it makes her investors feel secure. Why do you have to be so difficult? Why is it always a battle with you?" "A battle?" I put the fork down. "Dad, she hired a private investigator to dig into my employment history. She tried to get me fired, and now she wants me to sign a contract that says I can't talk about it. And you think I am the one making it a battle? She is under pressure," he shouted, his voice booming off the walls. "Do you have any idea what kind of stress she is carrying? She is building an empire. She is securing the family legacy. And you are, what, obsessing over principles?" "I am protecting myself," I said quietly. "You are being selfish," he said. He walked over to me, looming. "Listen to me. Sadie, We co-signed a line of credit for her early on, a big one, before the investors came in. If this funding round gets shaky because you are making noise and the company stumbles, it is not just Blair who gets hurt. It is us. It is your mother's retirement. I stared at him. You co-signed? I asked. Yes, he said, looking away. We had to. She needed the runway. You told me you didn't have the liquidity to help me with a down payment on a condo 2 years ago. I said, you said the market was too tight. That was different. He muttered, this is a business. This is high yield. I felt something break inside me. It wasn't a loud crack. It was a quiet, structural failure. The realization that there was no version of this story where I was the priority. I was the insulation they used to keep Blair warm. Sign the paper. Sadie, he said, his voice softening into a plea. Keep the peace. For your mother. I walked to the door and opened it. Get out, I said. Sadie, get out. He looked at me with genuine shock. I had never ordered him to do anything in my life. He shook his head, a mixture of pity and disgust, and walked out. I locked the door and slid the deadbolt. Then I leaned my forehead against the cool wood and breathed. Peace, I realized, was just their word for my silence. They wanted me to be the shock absorber. They wanted me to take the hits so Blair didn't have to feel the bumps in the road. I wasn't going to do it anymore. The next morning, the war moved from my family to my reputation. I received a LinkedIn message from a woman named Chloe, a girl I had lived with in a dorm freshman year of college. We hadn't spoken in 12 years. Chloe. Hey, Sadie. Weird question. A guy called me today asking about our freshman year. He said he was doing a background clearance for a government contract you applied for. He kept asking if you ever had episodes, or if you were medicated back then. I told him you were the most normal person I knew, but it was super creepy. Are you okay? I stared at the screen. Government contract. That was the lie. I checked my email. There was another one from a former supervisor at my first job. Subject. Reference check? Hi, Sadie. Someone from Argus Risk called me. They were asking very specific questions about your departure in 2018. They seemed to be fishing for information about insubordination. I shut them down. But I wanted you to know. My stomach churned. Blair's consultant wasn't just checking boxes. He was planting seeds. He was calling everyone I had ever known and asking leading questions that suggested I was unstable, insubordinate, and medicated. Even if the people said no, the question itself left a stain. Does Sadie have a history of outbursts? No. Are you sure? The doubt would linger. I went to work, feeling like I was walking through a fog of contagion. I felt dirty. I felt like I had to wear a sign that said, I am not crazy. My boss, Marcus, called me in. Good news, he said, though he didn't look at me. We closed the internal inquiry. The vendor audit showed that the re-verification request was irregular. We are dismissing the flag on your file. You are cleared for full access again. Thank you, I said. But, Sadie, he added, shifting papers on his desk. This kind of noise, it is distracting. We handle sensitive compliance data here. If you have personal drama spilling into the workplace, you need to cap it. We can't have external investigators calling the switchboard. I understand. I said. I walked back to my desk. I was cleared. But I wasn't clean. Marcus would always remember this. I was now the employee with drama. I was the liability. I went home and sat in the dark. I felt small. I felt like Blair was winning. She had the money, the parents, and the narrative. All I had was a PDF of a fund structure and a broken heart. Then, the twist landed. It came at 9:43 p.m., a forwarded email. The subject line was, FW, apology/correction. It was from an address I didn't recognize. J. Miller Argus Risk, com. I opened it. Ms. Bailey, I am a junior analyst at Argus Risk Solutions. I was the one tasked with the initial outreach on your file. I was told this was a standard hostile party diligence for a corporate takeover defense. I didn't realize until today, when I saw the client name on a billing code. that this was a family matter. I have a sister. If someone did this to her, I would burn the building down. I cannot give you the full file, but I am attaching the initial scope of work document that initiated the project. You didn't get this from me. J. Attached was a single PDF page. I opened it. My hand hovered over the mouse. Client: Luminosity/Blair Bailey. Direct. Target: Sadie Bailey. Objective: Comprehensive reputation audit. Identify potential leverage points regarding mental health, financial instability, or professional misconduct. Goal: create documentation sufficient to justify exclusion for cause from family trust/governance participation and neutralize public credibility. I stared at the words. Neutralize public credibility. It was in black and white. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a hit. I printed the document. I held it in my hands. It felt heavy, like a loaded gun. I called Arthur Keene, the attorney I had met at the mixer. It was late, but he had given me his cell number. I have it, I said when he answered. Have what? He asked, his voice gravelly with sleep. The paper. I said, I have the scope document. It names her. It names the objective. Neutralize credibility. There was a silence on the line. Then Arthur shifted, the sound of a chair creaking. Okay, he said, his voice sharp now. Listen to me. Sadie, do not call her. Do not post it on Facebook. Do not send it to your parents. Why not? I asked. It proves everything. Because right now, it is just embarrassing, Arthur said. If you use it now, you get an apology. Maybe. You get a, sorry, I went too far. You want more than an apology. Sadie, you want safety. What do I do? You find the lever. Arthur said. You said she has a silent partner? Yes. Does that partner have an ethics clause? I thought about the Northlake documents. I had read the LP agreement template in the investor portal. Yes, I said. The fund has a strict reputational risk and ethical conduct representation for all portfolio company founders. It specifically prohibits harassment, malicious prosecution, or unethical targeting of individuals. Arthur let out a low whistle. There is your lever, he said. If she used company funds, or even if she just acted as the CEO, to target a civilian with a smear campaign, she is in breach of her funding agreement. She didn't just be a bad sister. Sadie, she committed a breach of contract with her investors. So I tell them? I asked. Not yet, Arthur said. You prepare the notice, you draft the complaint, you attach the scope document, you make it a bulletproof package, and you wait for the moment where it does the most damage. You wait until she cannot spin it. I hung up. I felt a cold calm settle over me. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the prosecutor. But the victory demanded a sacrifice. Mark came over the next evening. He looked exhausted. He had dark circles under his eyes. He watched me as I organized the new evidence into the project silence binder. Sadie, he said, we need to talk. I didn't look up. I found the breach clause in the Northlake contract. I need to highlight this. I muttered. Sadie, look at me. I looked up. He was standing by the door, his keys in his hand. I can't do this, he said. Can't do what? I can't watch you become this, he said. You are not the woman I fell in love with. You are a machine. You talk about leverage and clauses and evidence. You are obsessed with destroying her. I am obsessed with survival, I shouted, standing up. She is trying to ruin me. Mark, I know, he shouted back. And it is awful, but you are letting her win by letting her turn you into this bitter, calculating person. You are not living your life anymore. You are living a reaction to hers. He opened the door. I love you, Sadie, but I can't be the sandbag you punch anymore. I can't be the person who holds you while you vibrate with rage every night. I am exhausted. Mark, don't, I said, my voice cracking. I am sorry, he said. Call me when the war is over, if there is anything left of you. He closed the door. I stood in the silence. The apartment felt vast and empty. I looked at the binder on the table. I looked at the empty space where his shoes used to be. I sat down on the floor. I pulled my knees to my chest. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. I felt desiccated, dry. Blair had taken my parents. She had taken my peace. Now she had taken Mark. She had stripped me down to the studs. But she had forgotten one thing. When you strip a house down to the studs, you see the structure. You see what holds it up. I pulled out my phone. I opened the voice memo app. I needed to say it out loud, to hear my own voice in the empty room, to make sure I still existed. I pressed record. "My name is Sadie Bailey," I said to the empty room. My voice was steady, terrifyingly calm. "I am 33 years old. I am not a liability. I am not a risk factor. I am the person who checks the math." I paused. I looked at the scope document lying on the floor. "You paid $12,000 to prove I was nobody. Blair, you wanted to edit me out of the story, but you forgot the first rule of compliance. You have to save the receipts. I am going to stop absorbing your damage. I am going to stop being the bigger person. I am going to choose my own life. And if that means I have to burn your reality to the ground to build mine, then I will strike the match. End recording." I saved the file. I stood up. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. I drank it standing up, looking out the window at the city lights. I was alone. I was heartbroken. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of her. I knew where the money came from, and I knew exactly how to send it back. The email from Sterling Vance arrived on a Tuesday morning, landing in my inbox with the quiet authority of institutional money. The subject line was dry. Notice of beneficiary proxy. Compliance governance review. I opened it while drinking my second cup of coffee. The caffeine was the only thing keeping me upright. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night since Mark left. The apartment felt too big, too silent, and I had filled the void with the humming anxiety of what I was about to do. Dear Ms. Bailey, per the charter of the North Lake Growth Strategy Pool, we are initiating a limited partner review regarding a portfolio asset currently under a Stage 2 risk monitor. As a beneficiary with allocated capital in the affected vintage, you are entitled to submit a statement of concern if you have material knowledge of governance or ethical breaches. The review period closes in 72 hours. I stared at the screen. Material knowledge. I didn't just have knowledge, I had the map. I logged into the beneficiary portal. It was an archaic system, a relic of secure banking from the early 2000s, all gray boxes and Times New Roman font. I navigated to the Grievance and Ethics tab. It was designed for whistleblowers, for people who saw embezzlement or fraud and needed a safe channel to report it. I wasn't reporting fraud. I was reporting character assassination paid for with company potential. I began to type. To the Compliance Committee, I am a beneficiary of the North Lake Trust. I am submitting this formal complaint regarding the conduct of the leadership at Luminosity, a portfolio company within the Aura Strategic Ventures vehicle. The CEO of Luminosity has engaged in a documented campaign of reputational sabotage against a private individual, utilizing third-party vendors to fabricate adverse personal history. This conduct violates the ethical leadership covenant of the North Lake Limited Partner Agreement, specifically the clauses regarding malicious prosecution and integrity of operations. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I didn't write like a sister. I wrote like a compliance officer. I cited dates. I referenced the Argus Risk Solutions scope document. I uploaded the PDF of the Neutralize Credibility Order. I attached the timeline I had built, the date of the funding, the date of the background check, the date of the attempt to interfere with my employment. This is not a personal dispute. I wrote in the conclusion, this is a misuse of the reputation and leverage afforded by the fund's capital. The leadership is reckless, vindictive, and currently engaged in tortious interference. The capital is at risk. I pressed submit. A small green banner appeared at the top of the screen. Submission received. Case number 4920. It was done. I had just fired a signal flare into the boardroom. Blair sensed the shift in the atmospheric pressure almost immediately. She was intuitive that way, like an animal that knows an earthquake is coming before the ground shakes. 2 hours after I submitted the complaint, my phone buzzed. Blair. Hey, I was just thinking about you. I feel terrible about coffee the other day. I am so stressed. I miss my big sister. Can we do a reset? It was the love bomb, phase 1 of the cycle. I didn't reply. 30 minutes later, Blair. Are you ignoring me? That is so childish. Sadie, I am trying to build a bridge here. Phase 2, the guilt. Another hour passed. I was at work, reviewing a batch of vendor contracts, forcing my brain to focus on indemnity clauses while my phone vibrated against the desk. Blair. I heard from Mom you are still acting weird. Seriously. Sadie, do not ruin this for me. I have everything riding on this next close. If you are doing something behind my back, you will regret it. Phase 3. The threat. I turned my phone over, face down. The oscillation between affection and menace was dizzying. It was designed to keep me off balance, to make me question my own reality. Maybe she really does miss me. A part of me whispered, maybe I am being cruel. But then I would look at the printed scope document in my bag. Target, Sadie Bailey. She didn't miss me. She missed the feeling of safety she got when I was under her thumb. The real blow came on Thursday. I volunteered as the treasurer for a local literacy nonprofit. Reading Forward. It was a small organization, but I loved it. I loved balancing their books, ensuring every dollar of the grant money went to books for kids. It was pure, uncomplicated good. I received an email from the board chair, a woman named Eleanor, who I had always respected. Sadie, can you come by the office? We need to discuss your fiduciary status. I left work early and drove to the nonprofit's small storefront office. Eleanor was waiting for me in the back room, looking uncomfortable. Sadie, she said, not offering me a seat. We had a disturbing call yesterday. A risk consultant. Argus, I said. The word tasted like ash. Yes, Eleanor said, surprised. They asked if we were aware of your financial instability. They asked if we had audited the petty cash lately. They implied that you were currently under investigation at your primary employment for data mishandling. I felt the blood drain from my face. They went after the nonprofit. They went after the one thing I did that had nothing to do with money or status. Eleanor, I said, my voice shaking. That is a lie. I am being targeted by a family member who is trying to discredit me. My employment is secure. The petty cash is perfect. You can audit it right now. I believe you, Eleanor said gently. I know you. Sadie, you are the most honest person I know. But we are a 501c3. We rely on public trust. If there is a risk consultant asking questions about our treasurer, it creates a liability. We can't have that kind of smoke, even if there is no fire. She slid a piece of paper across the desk. We think it is best if you step down, just until this blows over. I looked at the resignation letter. It was already typed. I picked up a pen. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. In my world, once the question of integrity was raised, the damage was already done. I will sign it. I said, on one condition. What? Eleanor asked. I want a written record of the call. I said, I want you to write down exactly who called, what they asked, and the date. Sign it. If I'm going to lose this, I want proof of who took it from me. Eleanor nodded. She typed it up. She signed it. Statement of contact. Argus Risk Solutions inquired regarding Sadie Bailey's fitness for fiduciary duty. Insinuations of financial impropriety were made. I took the paper. I signed the resignation. I walked out of the office, past the stacks of children's books I had helped buy, and I sat in my car and screamed. It was a silent scream, my mouth open, my lungs burning, but no sound came out. I had lost Mark. Now I had lost my sanctuary. Blair wasn't just pruning dead weight, she was scorching the earth. I drove straight to my parents' house. I hadn't planned to. The car just took me there. I needed to see them. I needed to know if they understood what was happening. It was a mistake. Blair was already there. I walked into the kitchen and found a tableau that looked like it had been staged for a Lifetime movie. My mother was sitting at the island, holding Blair's hand. Blair was crying. Beautiful. Silent tears that tracked perfectly down her cheeks without ruining her mascara. My father was pacing by the window, looking like a man who was watching a storm roll in. "Sadie," my mother said, her voice tight. "We were just talking about you, I bet." I said. I threw my keys on the counter. The noise made Blair jump. Blair looked up at me, her eyes wide and red-rimmed. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Doing what?" I asked. "Getting fired from my volunteer job?" "Because that happened today. Your consultant called the literacy board and suggested I was stealing money." "I didn't tell them to do that," Blair sobbed. "I just told them to check your background. I can't control every phone call they make." "You paid them," I shouted. "You gave them the objective." Neutralize credibility. "Do you know what that means, Blair? It means they destroy me so you look clean." "Stop it," my father roared. He slammed his hand on the table. The sound echoed through the kitchen. "Stop attacking your sister," he said. "Look at her. She is falling apart. The fund. The investors. They launched an inquiry today." My heart skipped a beat. The complaint? It had landed. "They sent a notice," Blair choked out. "A formal compliance inquiry. They are asking for emails. They are asking for vendor logs. They said there is a credible allegation of ethical misconduct." She looked at me, her eyes searching. "Who did you tell? Sadie? Who are you talking to?" I didn't answer. I stood there, stone-faced. My father walked over to me. He looked older than I had ever seen him. His skin was gray, papery. "Sadie," he said, his voice dropping to a desperate rasp. "You have to stop this. Whatever you are doing, whoever you are talking to, you have to shut it down." "Why?" I asked. "Why should I protect her when she is hunting me?" "Because it is not just her," he hissed. He grabbed my arm. It was painful. We co-signed. "Sadie, I told you." "I know," I said. "A line of credit." "No," he said, shaking his head. "Not just a line of credit. We put the house up as collateral." The room stopped spinning. It just froze. "You what?" I whispered. "The house." My mother wept from the stool. "We leveraged the equity, all of it, to bridge her to the Series A. If the funding gets pulled, if the startup fails, the bank takes the house." I looked at them. I looked at this kitchen, with its granite countertops and the sunlight streaming in. This was the house I grew up in. This was the house where I had hidden in my room reading books while Blair practiced cheerleading in the yard. This was their retirement. This was everything they owned, and they had bet it all on Blair. I looked at Blair. She wasn't crying anymore. She was watching me, gauging my reaction. She knew. She had known all along. She knew that she had a human shield. "You trapped them," I said to her. My voice was very quiet. "You made them bet the house so that if you failed, you wouldn't fail alone. You took them hostage." "I did it for the family," Blair shouted, standing up, "to build wealth for all of us. And now you are going to burn it down because you are jealous? Because you can't stand that I am the special one?" I looked at my father. He was terrified. He wasn't protecting Blair because he loved her more. He was protecting her because he was terrified of being homeless. "Please, Sadie," he whispered. "Fix this. Be the bigger person. Just one last time. Hostage math." That was the equation. If I punished Blair, I destroyed my parents. If I saved my parents, I let Blair erase me. I looked at my father's hand on my arm. I gently peeled his fingers off. "I can't fix it, Dad," I said. "The inquiry is already started. You can retract it." Blair screamed. "If it is you, if you filed something, take it back." I turned to walk away. "Sadie," my mother wailed, "don't you walk away. We will lose everything." I stopped at the door. I looked back at them, a family held together by debt and delusion. "I didn't do this," I said. "She bought the gun. She pointed it. All I did was report the shot." I walked out. I got in my car. I drove 2 blocks and pulled over because I couldn't see the road through my tears. I called Arthur Keene. I told him everything. The inquiry, the parents, the house. Arthur listened. He let me cry for a minute. Which was kind of him. This changes the calculus, he said finally. I have to stop. I said, I have to withdraw the complaint. I can't let my parents lose their home. Arthur, I can't be the reason they are on the street. Sadie, listen to me, Arthur said. His voice was sharp. You are not the reason. Blair is the reason. She leveraged the asset. She violated the ethics clause. She triggered the risk. But I pulled the trigger. No, Arthur said. You pointed out that the gun was loaded. There is a difference, but I understand. You have a conscience. That is your weakness and your strength. So what do I do? We draft a pivot notice, Arthur said. We don't retract the evidence. The evidence is true. We can't lie to the fund. That would make you liable. But we can shift the remedy. Shift the remedy? We tell the fund that while the breach occurred, the beneficiary, you, is willing to accept a cure rather than a kill. We offer Blair a way out. She admits the wrongdoing. She settles the issue. She fires the consultant, and she recuses herself from the reputation management strategy. The fund might just slap her wrist and freeze a portion of the capital, rather than withdrawing it entirely. It saves the company? I asked. It might. Arthur said, it keeps the lights on. It saves your parents' house. But Sadie, it means she survives. She gets to keep being the CEO. She gets to keep the win. I closed my eyes. I saw my father's gray face. I saw the resignation letter from the nonprofit. I hate her. I whispered, I know. Arthur said, but do you hate her enough to burn your parents? I sat there for a long time. The streetlights flickered on. No, I said, I don't. Then we draft the notice. Arthur said, we give her a lifeline, but we make it a chokehold. She survives. But she does it on your terms. I hung up. I felt defeated. I had the sword in my hand, and I had to put it back in the sheath because Blair had tied our parents to the dragon. The next day, the fund's inquiry deepened. I went to work. Moving like a ghost, I checked the portal. The status of my complaint had moved to review in progress. I received an email from the fund's compliance officer, Ms. Bailey. Thank you for your submission. The evidence provided is substantial. We have initiated a material adverse event protocol. We will be interviewing the portfolio leadership this week. Blair's world was crumbling. I could feel it. She wasn't texting me anymore. She was probably in a war room with her lawyers, trying to explain why she had authorized a neutralization campaign against a civilian. I sat down to draft the pivot notice Arthur had suggested. I, the beneficiary, seek remedial action. I typed the words. They tasted like bile. I was saving her. Again. I was being the steady one. Again. Then, my phone rang. It was Eleanor from the nonprofit. Sadie, she said, I thought you should know. The consultant called again. What? I asked. I resigned. Eleanor. It is over. He didn't care. Eleanor said. He sent us a file. He sent us copies of your college medical records. From the student health center. From 12 years ago. The room tilted. Medical records? I whispered. That is illegal. That is a HIPAA violation. He said it was relevant to your judgment, Eleanor said. She sounded horrified. Sadie, he sent it to the entire board. It details the counseling you had after your grandfather died, the anxiety medication. I dropped the phone. It hit the desk with a clatter. Counseling. My grief counseling. Blair knew about that. She was the only one who knew the name of the doctor I saw. She was the only one who knew I had taken anxiety meds for 6 months when I was 22. She hadn't just authorized a background check. She had weaponized my grief. She had dug up the most vulnerable moment of my life, the moment I lost the only person who loved me for me, and she had emailed it to my colleagues to prove I was unfit. I looked at the pivot notice on my screen. I seek remedial action. I looked at the blinking cursor. She wasn't stopping, even with the inquiry launching, even with the house on the line. She was still firing. She was so obsessed with winning, so terrified of my truth. that she would violate federal privacy laws just to make sure I stayed down. I thought about my parents. We bet the house. I thought about Mark. You are the person who absorbs. I thought about my grandfather. Unborrowable. If I saved her now, she would never stop. She would do this to me forever. She would hold my parents hostage forever. She would use their fear to keep me silent, and she would use my silence to erase me. I picked up the phone. I put it back to my ear. Eleanor, I said. My voice sounded strange, like iron. Yes? Send me the email he sent you. Forward it to me right now. I will, Eleanor said. Sadie, I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. I said, just send it. I hung up. I deleted the pivot notice. I opened a new document. I wasn't going to be the villain in Blair's story. I was already the villain. She had cast me as the unstable, medicated, jealous sister. She had sold tickets to that show. Fine. If I was the villain, I would play the part. But villains don't offer settlements. Villains don't negotiate. Villains pull the lever. I looked at the hostage math again. If I let Blair win, my parents kept their house, but they lost their daughter, because I would never speak to them again. I would be a shell. If I stopped Blair, my parents lost the house. They would be devastated. They would be broke, but they would be free. They would be free of the lie. They would be free of the leverage Blair held over them, and I would be free. I realized then that peace wasn't the absence of conflict. Peace was the absence of lies. I wasn't going to save them from the truth anymore. I waited for the email from Eleanor. It arrived 2 minutes later. I saved it as Exhibit D. I logged back into the portal. I added a new entry to Case 4920. Supplemental evidence, ongoing harassment and privacy violation. Date: today. Description: the subject has distributed protected medical records to a third-party board in a continued effort to inflict reputational harm. This action demonstrates a refusal to cure the breach and an escalation of unethical conduct. I hit submit. I texted Arthur. Sadie: no deal. She just leaked my medical records. Burn it down. Arthur replied instantly. Arthur: understood. Proceeding. I sat back in my chair. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. The crushing weight was gone. The anxiety was gone. In its place was a cold, clear silence. I wasn't absorbing anymore. I was reflecting, and Blair was about to see her own reflection for the first time. The next morning, Blair announced the fundraising gala. It was all over social media. Luminosity, the next chapter, a black tie event at the city's art museum, investors, influencers, press. She was going to announce the close of the Series B. She was going to dazzle them. She sent me an invite. Blair: please come. Mom and Dad are terrified. Show them we are a family, just for one night. Please. I looked at the digital invitation. It glittered on the screen. I would go, not to show unity, not to save face. I would go because the fund's bylaws required a beneficiary to be present for a trigger event if the action was taken in person. I wasn't going as a sister. I was going as the majority vote. I accepted the invite. I went to my closet. I pushed aside the gray blazers and the sensible cardigans. I reached into the back, to a garment bag I hadn't opened in years. It was a dress I had bought for a gala I never attended. Deep midnight blue, silk, sharp lines. I held it up. I wasn't nobody. I was the silent partner, and silence was about to get very, very loud. The venue was the City Art Museum, a glass and steel cathedral dedicated to the preservation of things that had no utility other than their beauty. It was the perfect stage for Blair. She had rented the Great Hall for the evening, a space where the acoustics were designed to make whispers sound profound and applause sound like thunder. I arrived at 7 o'clock. I was wearing the midnight blue silk dress. It was a garment I had bought 3 years ago for a charity ball Mark and I had planned to attend before a flu bug grounded us. It fit differently now. I was thinner, sharper, the silk draped over me like liquid armor, cold against my skin. I walked up the limestone steps, passing a phalanx of photographers. They were not there for me. They were there for the visionary. They were there for the founder of Luminosity. the woman who had promised to optimize the human soul with an app and a supplement subscription. I saw my parents near the coat check. They looked like refugees in expensive clothing. My father was wearing his tuxedo, but it hung loosely on him, as if he had shrunk in the wash. My mother was clutching a beaded clutch bag with a grip that turned her knuckles white. "Sadie," my mother breathed when she saw me. She rushed forward, her heels clicking frantically on the marble. "You came. Thank God." She reached for my hands. Her palms were clammy. "You look beautiful," she said, her voice pitched high with hysteria. "Doesn't she look beautiful, Frank?" My father looked at me. His eyes were hollow. He looked at the dress, then at my face. He didn't see a daughter. He saw a negotiation chip. He saw the only thing standing between him and foreclosure. "Thank you for coming, Sadie," he said quietly. "Just smile tonight, please, for everyone's sake." I didn't smile. I looked past them, into the cavernous hall where waiters were circulating with trays of champagne. "I am not here to make a scene, Dad," I said. "I am here because the bylaws require it." He flinched. He didn't know what bylaws I was talking about. He assumed I meant family rules. He didn't know I meant the Northlake Growth Fund's Article 7 regarding beneficiary oversight during material events. We moved into the room. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the low, confident hum of money. There were 300 people here. Venture capitalists in fleece vests over dress shirts, angel investors in statement jewelry, tech journalists with their phones recording every ambient sound. Blair was at the center of the room. Naturally, she was wearing white, an architectural column of white crepe that made her look like a modern Greek statue. She was laughing at something a man in a gray suit was saying, throwing her head back, exposing the long, elegant line of her throat. I watched her. I felt a strange detachment, like I was watching a nature documentary about a predator in its natural habitat. She looked radiant. She looked successful. She looked like a woman who hadn't just leaked her sister's medical records to a nonprofit board 48 hours ago. I took a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray and moved to the perimeter. I was the ghost at the feast. The lights dimmed slightly, signaling that the presentation was about to begin. Blair moved to a small stage set up in front of a massive abstract expressionist painting. A microphone was waiting for her. She stepped up. The room hushed instantly. She had that gift. She commanded silence not by asking for it, but by expecting it. "Welcome, everyone," she said. Her voice was warm, intimate, projected perfectly through the speakers. She began her pitch. It was a polished, rhythmically precise monologue about the future of wellness. She spoke about fragmentation and holistic integration. She spoke about the anxiety of the modern age and how luminosity was the cure, and then she started stealing. "We built this company on a foundation of radical transparency," Blair said, pacing the stage slowly. "We believe in risk mitigation through honesty. We believe that you cannot scale a dream unless you have sustainable scale in your operations." I tightened my grip on the glass. Risk mitigation, sustainable scale. These were my words. These were the phrases I had used over dinner tables for years, trying to explain my job to a family that rolled their eyes at me. I remembered a Christmas 3 years ago where I had talked about sustainable scale regarding a charity project, and Blair had laughed and called me corporate boring. Now, she was wearing my language like she was wearing the white dress. She had taken the vocabulary of my competence and repurposed it into a sales pitch for her house of cards. She didn't know what the words meant. To her, they were just sounds that made investors nod. To me, they were the architecture of integrity. She was selling my soul to buy her applause. Great speech, isn't it? I turned. A man was standing next to me. He was in his 50s, wearing a velvet blazer that cost more than my car. He had the relaxed, predatory posture of a man who managed other people's money for a living. "It is polished," I said neutrally. "I am Julian," he said, extending a hand. "I am on the advisory board. You look familiar. Are you with the PR firm?" "No," I said. I am Sadie, the sister. Julian's eyebrows shot up. Ah, the sister. The finance one? I paused. The finance one. That was new. Something like that. I said. Julian chuckled, leaning in as if sharing a secret. Well, you must be proud. She is a firecracker. Honestly, we were worried about the burn rate a few months ago. The marketing spend was aggressive. But once she locked in that silent partner capital, the whole picture changed. He took a sip of his scotch. It is brilliant structuring. Really, he continued. Most founders treat early capital as fuel. Blair treats it as a floor. She knows that Northlake money is locked up. It is basically guaranteed. She leveraged that unshakable position to negotiate much better terms with the Series B leads. She told them, I have $3 million that isn't going anywhere, so if you want in, you pay a premium. My stomach dropped. She told them it was guaranteed? I asked. Julian nodded, basically untouchable. She said the silent partner was a strategic lockbox. It gave everyone the confidence to double down. If that money was liquid or callable, God, the valuation would collapse, but she assured us it is ironclad. He smiled at me. Smart girl. She knows how to use leverage. I looked at Blair on stage. She was beaming, soaking in the adoration. She hadn't just used the money. She had used the assumption of my silence. She had bet everything on the idea that the silent partner, me, would never speak, never move, never claim the rights of ownership. She had sold my passivity as a financial asset. Excuse me, I said to Julian. I walked away. I needed air. I needed to not be in this room where my erasure was being celebrated as a business strategy. I found a quiet corridor near the restrooms. It was lined with marble busts of Roman senators. I leaned against the cool wall and checked my phone. I had an email. It had arrived 4 minutes ago. From Compliance Office / Northlake Trust. Subject, Urgent. Determination of Inquiry. Case, 4920. My hands shook as I opened it. Ms. Bailey. The Compliance Committee has concluded its expedited review of the evidence provided in Case 4920, including the supplemental submission regarding the unauthorized distribution of medical records. We have found credible evidence of material ethical misconduct by the portfolio leadership. The actions described constitute a direct violation of the reputational integrity clause of the limited partner agreement. Under the fund's bylaws, we are prepared to issue a Stage 3 sanction. However, as the beneficiary whose specific interest is affected, you have 2 procedural options. Option A, administrative review. We issue a private warning to the company and place the capital in a monitoring status. The funds remain deployed, but the company is put on a 6-month probation. This is handled internally. Option B, beneficiary triggered withdrawal. You invoke your right under Article 9 to demand immediate dissociation from an unethical investment. This triggers an automatic, contractually mandated freeze and withdrawal notice to the company. This action is irreversible and requires immediate disclosure to the company's board. Please advise immediately. We are holding the file open. I stared at the screen. Option A was the peace option. It was the save the house option. Blair gets a slap on the wrist. She keeps the money. She keeps the gala. She keeps the lie. Option B was the nuclear option. It pulls the rug out from under the entire deal. The guaranteed capital vanishes. The valuation collapses. The bank takes the house. I looked up from the phone. Blair was walking down the corridor. She had finished her speech. She was flanked by 2 assistants, but she waved them off when she saw me. She walked toward me, her white dress rustling softly. She looked triumphant. She looked untouchable. You are hiding, she said. I am reading email. I said. She stopped in front of me. She crossed her arms. Her eyes were bright, almost feverish. Did you see them? She asked. Did you see the Series B leads? They are eating it up. We are going to close tonight. Sadie, tonight. That is nice, I said. She stepped closer. She dropped her voice. I know you're angry. Sadie, I know about the nonprofit thing, okay? I admit it. It was aggressive. Aggressive? I repeated. You sent my medical records to strangers. Blair, you tried to shame me out of a volunteer job. I did what I had to do, she hissed. Her face twisted. You were threatening me. You were filing complaints. You left me no choice. I had to prove you were unreliable so that if you tried to talk to the investors, they would think you were crazy. She poked me in the chest with a manicured finger. And it worked. She said, I won. The investors are here. The money is locked. Mom and Dad are safe, unless you screw it up, so wipe that tragic look off your face and come back inside. We are doing a toast. Why? I asked. The question stopped her. Why what? Why do you hate me this much? I asked. It wasn't a scream. It was a genuine question. I have never done anything to you, Blair. I have never competed with you. I have never asked for your money. I have spent my entire life clapping for you from the sidelines. Why did you pay $12,000 to destroy me? Blair stared at me. The silence stretched, thin and taut. Then, she laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. Because you are the stable one, she spat. What? God, you are so dense, she said, shaking her head. Sadie the rock. Sadie the fixer. Sadie who never messes up. Do you have any idea what it is like to be the charismatic one? The one everyone expects to fly? It is exhausting. I have to be perfect. I have to be dazzling. And every time I stumble, every time I make a mess, there you are. Quiet, boring, stable, her eyes filled with tears. But they were tears of rage. Mom and Dad always say, Thank God for Sadie. Sadie will handle the paperwork. Sadie will fix the leak. I hated it. I hated needing you. I hated that when I started this company. The first thing Dad said was, Maybe Sadie can look at the contracts. She stepped back, her chest heaving. I wanted to prove I didn't need you. I wanted to prove that I could build a world where stable didn't matter, where boring was a sin. I wanted to cut you out so I could finally be the only Bailey that mattered. So yeah, I paid $12,000, and I would pay it again, because I don't want a sister who fixes things. I want to be the one who doesn't break things. She wiped her eyes furiously. But I won. She said again, I built it, and you are just a guest at my party. So get in line, Sadie, or get out. She turned and walked back toward the great hall. I stood alone in the corridor. The truth hung in the air, cold and sharp. She didn't hate me because I was a liability. She hated me because I was a mirror. She hated that my existence reminded her that her chaos had a cost. I looked at my phone again. The email was still open. Option B. I thought about my parents. I pictured them in the lobby, holding hands, terrified. I pictured their house, the mortgage papers signed in a panic. If I pressed the button, they lost everything. I felt a wave of nausea. I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes. I couldn't do it. I couldn't be the executioner. It was too cruel. I should just take option A. Let the fund handle it quietly. Let her keep the money. Let my parents keep the roof over their heads, to keep your future unborrowable. My grandfather's voice, it wasn't a memory. It felt like he was standing next to me, unborrowable. He didn't mean money. He meant the soul. He meant the self. Blair had borrowed everything. She had borrowed my parents' retirement. She had borrowed my reputation. She had borrowed my history. She had borrowed my silence. If I let her win now, I was signing a loan agreement for the rest of my life. I was agreeing to be the collateral for her ego forever. I was agreeing that my dignity was a currency she could spend whenever she felt insecure. And my parents? They were already lost. They had sold their safety to buy her love years ago. If I saved the house, I wasn't saving them. I was just enabling the addiction. I opened my eyes. I wasn't the stable one anymore. Stability is static. Stability is just standing still while people throw rocks at you. I was the correction. I walked back into the great hall. Blair was near the stage, accepting a glass of champagne from a waiter. She saw me coming. She smiled, a triumphant, smug smile. She thought I was coming to kneel. I walked up to her. The circle of people around her parted. Sensing the energy, Back for the toast? Blair asked sweetly. I looked at her. I looked at the white dress. I looked at the fear hiding behind her eyes. The fear that I would finally stop playing my part. I won't argue with you. Blair, I said. My voice was low, calm, barely audible over the jazz music. Good, she said. And I won't beg you. I said, even better. And I won't protect you. I said. She frowned. What? I looked her dead in the eye. You purchased these consequences, Blair, on purpose. You paid $12,000 for this moment. I am just delivering the receipt. I pulled out my phone. What are you doing? She asked, her voice faltering. I held the phone up so she could see the screen, the email, the 2 buttons. Option B, beneficiary triggered withdrawal. Sadie, don't, she whispered. Her eyes widened. She recognized the logo. She recognized the language. I tapped the screen. Confirmation. Are you sure you want to initiate immediate withdrawal under Article 9? I tapped yes. Action submitted. Processing. I showed her the green check mark. What did you do? She gasped. She grabbed my wrist. Sadie, what did you do? I pulled my wrist away. I stopped being the silent partner. I said. I turned around. The room was buzzing. The lights were dimming further for the main video presentation. A hush fell over the crowd as the giant screen behind the stage flickered to life. I walked toward the exit. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was an automated notification from the Sterling Vance system. Notice of capital freeze and withdrawal dispatched to Luminosity Board of Directors. Time, 8:42 p.m. It was done. I walked past my parents. My mother reached out for me. Sadie? She whispered. Where are you going? The presentation is starting. I looked at them. I felt a profound, aching sadness. I loved them. I really did. But I couldn't carry them anymore. I am going home. Mom, I said. I walked out the heavy glass doors into the cool night air. Behind me, inside the hall, I heard the polite applause begin. They were clapping for the video. They were clapping for the illusion. But inside the digital veins of the banking system, a kill switch had just been thrown. A $3 million hole was about to open up beneath the stage. And for the first time in her life, Blair was going to have to see if she could fly without me holding the net. I walked down the steps. I felt physically ill. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs and leaned against a lamppost, taking deep, ragged breaths. I had just burned my family's house down, but as I looked up at the city skyline, at the grid of lights against the darkness, I realized something else. I was standing on my own 2 feet, and the ground was solid. I did not leave the building immediately. Gravity, or perhaps a dark, compelling curiosity, held me in the vestibule of the museum. I stood in the shadows of the coat check area, looking through the towering glass doors into the great hall. I needed to see it. I needed to witness the moment the physics of Blair's world finally obeyed the laws of gravity. Inside, the scene was a masterpiece of curated success. Blair was back on the stage. The lighting gelled to a soft, flattering amber. The massive screen behind her displayed a graph with an arrow shooting upward, the universal symbol of "Trust us." She was transitioning into the close of her pitch. The moment where she usually asked for the check. "We are not just building a brand," she was saying, her voice filtering through the glass, muffled but audible. "We are building a legacy, a fortress of wellness that stands on the most solid financial foundation in the industry." She gestured to the side of the stage, where her chief financial officer, a man named David, who always looked like he had just run a marathon, was standing with a tablet. He was supposed to nod, to project confidence, to be the visual anchor for her claims, but David was not nodding. I watched as his phone vibrated in his hand. He glanced at it, a reflexive check, then he froze. He brought the phone closer to his face, his eyebrows knitting together. He tapped the screen, scrolling frantically, his face, already pale under the stage lights, drained of color entirely. He looked up at Blair, and for the first time in his professional life, he did not look at her with adoration. He looked at her with terror. He stepped forward, breaking the choreography. He whispered something to the board advisor, Julian, who was standing in the front row. Julian pulled out his own phone. He checked his email. I saw Julian's posture change. It was instant. One moment, he was a relaxed predator. The next, he was rigid, his spine snapping straight. He turned to the man next to him, the lead investor for the Series B round, and whispered something urgent. The ripple effect was visible. It moved through the front row like a cold wind. Phones came out, heads bent together. The polite smiles vanished, replaced by the sharp, calculating looks of people who realize they are standing in a room with a gas leak. Blair faltered. She saw it too. The energy in the room had shifted from adoration to skepticism in the span of 10 seconds. And our partners, she stammered, the smooth rhythm of her speech catching on the snag of their distraction. Our partners are fully committed. Excuse me, Ms. Bailey. It was the lead investor. He didn't wait for the Q&A session. He stood up. Buttoning his jacket, it was a gesture of departure, not engagement. We just received a notification from our diligence team, he said. His voice was loud enough to carry without a microphone. They are seeing a flag on the cap table, a material change in the underlying liquidity structure. Blair laughed. It was a brittle, high-pitched sound. I think there must be a glitch, she said. Our capital is locked. It is the Northlake Fund. You know them. We do, the investor said. And we know what a beneficiary withdrawal notice looks like. The room went dead silent. A withdrawal? Blair asked. Her voice was small. That is impossible. The silent partner is silent. They have no voting rights. Apparently, they do, the investor said. He looked at his phone again. The notice says the withdrawal is triggered by an ethical breach clause. It is immediate. The $3,200,000 isn't locked. Blair, it is gone. And if that equity hole exists, our valuation model is invalid. He looked at her, not with anger, but with the cold disappointment of a man who realized he had almost bought a fake Rolex. We are going to pause our commitment pending a full audit, he said. He turned and walked away. That was the dam breaking. The other investors stood up. The murmuring grew into a roar. Blair stood on the stage, the microphone clutching in her hand, looking like a captain whose ship had just evaporated beneath her feet. Wait, she shouted. Please, it is a mistake. It is an administrative error. David, tell them. She turned to her CFO. David looked at her and shook his head slowly. It is not an error. Blair, he said, his voice picked up by the lapel mic he had forgotten to mute. It is a confirmed kill order from the trust. The money is frozen. We are insolvent as of 30 seconds ago. Blair dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a deafening screech of feedback that made everyone wince. She stared at the retreating backs of the people she had spent 6 months charming. She looked frantic, her eyes darting around the room, looking for a villain, looking for an explanation. Julian, the board advisor, jumped onto the stage. He grabbed her arm, not gently. He pulled her toward the heavy velvet curtains, stage right. I moved. I knew where they were going. There was a private donors' lounge just off the main hall, a quiet room lined with silk wallpaper and soundproof doors. I walked toward it. I didn't run. I walked with the steady, measured pace of a person who had nothing left to hide. I reached the door just as Julian pushed Blair inside. I followed them in. The room was small and elegant, filled with the scent of fresh lilies. Blair was standing in the center of the rug. Hyperventilating, Julian was pacing, running a hand through his silver hair. Who did this? Blair was screaming. Who did this? It is sabotage. I will sue Northlake. I will sue the bank. You can't sue them. Blair, Julian shouted back. He spun around to face her. This isn't a bank error. This is a specific, targeted enforcement. I just got off the phone with the fund manager. What did they say? Blair demanded. They said the complaint came from inside the house. Blair, it is a beneficiary action. A beneficiary? Blair blinked, confused. But the fund is huge. Who? It is a specific trust, Julian said. The Sadie Bailey Irrevocable Trust. The silence that followed was absolute. It sucked the air out of the room. Blair went still. She stopped breathing. She stopped moving. Her brain was trying to process the impossible geometry of the words. Sadie. She turned slowly. She saw me standing by the door. I was still wearing the blue dress. I was holding my clutch bag in one hand and my phone in the other. I looked at her, and I saw the moment the comprehension hit her. It hit her like a physical blow, staggering her backward. "You," she whispered. It was a sound of pure horror. "You?" she screamed. The scream tore out of her throat, raw and animalistic. "You are the partner?" I didn't answer. I walked further into the room and closed the door behind me. Julian looked at me. He looked at Blair. He was a smart man. He did the math in 2 seconds. "I will give you a moment," he said quietly. He walked past me, slipping out the door, leaving us alone in the terrifying intimacy of the truth. Blair stared at me. Her hands were shaking so hard they were blurring. "You," she choked out. "You have the money? You have been the money this whole time?" "Technically, the trust has the money," I said. My voice was calm. It was the calm of the ocean after a hurricane. "But yes, I am the beneficiary. I am the silence you were so proud of." "Why?" she shrieked. She lunged at me, grabbing my shoulders. Her nails dug into my skin. "Why would you do this? You destroyed it. You destroyed everything. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you never asked," I said. I pulled her hands off me. I pushed her back, firmly. "You never asked where the money came from. Blair, you just took it. Just like you took the credit. Just like you took Mom and Dad's house." She stumbled back, clutching her chest. "I did this for us," she sobbed. "I built this company for the family. And you petty, jealous, miserable little shadow. You burned it down because I didn't invite you to a dinner?" "No," I said. I reached into my bag. I pulled out the folded stack of papers. The evidence. "I didn't burn it down because I was jealous." I said, "I burned it down because you tried to erase me." I threw the papers on the coffee table between us. They fanned out. The scope document from Argus Risk Solutions, the email to the nonprofit, the transcript of the calls to my former employers. "Look at it, Blair," I said. She looked down. She saw her own name on the client line. She saw the words, "Neutralize credibility." "You paid $12,000 to a stranger to hunt me." I said, "You sent my medical records, my grief counseling. Blair, the therapy I needed after Grandpa died. You sent that to a room full of strangers to prove I was unfit to buy books for children." She looked up at me. Her face was streaked with mascara. "I had to protect the brand," she whispered. "It was business." "No," I said. "It was hate. You hated that I was okay. You hated that I didn't need your spotlight to be happy. So you tried to break me. You tried to make me unemployable. You tried to isolate me from my friends. You tried to make me think I was crazy." I took a step closer to her. "You paid $12,000 to prove I am nobody," I said. I spoke the words slowly, letting each one land like a stone. I took a breath. "So I stopped funding the world where you get to decide who matters." The sentence hung in the air. It was the final verdict. Blair stared at me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at the papers. She looked at the blue dress. She looked at the sister she had dismissed as a piece of furniture for 33 years. And she realized, too late, that I was the load-bearing wall. She collapsed. It wasn't a theatrical faint. Her legs just gave out. She sank to the floor, her white dress billowing around her like a parachute. She put her face in her hands and wailed, "Mom and Dad." She sobbed, "Oh my God, Mom and Dad." I watched her. I felt a flicker of pity. But it was distant, like watching a stranger cry on the news. "They are going to lose the house," she wept. "They signed the collateral agreement. The bank will call the loan tomorrow. They will be on the street." "Sadie, how could you do that to them?" "I didn't do it to them," I said. I crouched down so I was eye level with her. "You gambled them, Blair. You put them on the table like chips. You knew the risk. You knew that if you got caught being unethical, the funding would dry up, and you did it anyway. You prioritized hurting me over saving them. I stood up. I refused to be the collateral anymore. I said, I refuse to let you use my silence to ensure your gambling addiction. Sadie, please, she begged. She reached for the hem of my dress. You can stop it. You can call the fund. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you withdraw the complaint. Please. I will do anything. I will sign anything. Just save the house. It is too late, I said. The kill switch is thrown. The investors walked out. Blair, even if I put the money back, the reputation is dead. You can't unring a bell. I walked to the door. Where are you going? She screamed. Do not leave me here. I opened the door. The sound of the chaos in the hallway rushed in. People were shouting. Staff were running. It sounded like the evacuation of a sinking ship. I am going to my life, I said. The one you tried to edit. I walked out. I didn't make it far. My parents were in the lobby. They were standing near the fountain, looking dazed. My father was holding his phone, staring at it as if it were a foreign object. My mother was clutching his arm, weeping softly. They saw me coming. Sadie, my mother cried. She ran to me. Her face was a mask of confusion and terror. What is happening? People are saying the money is gone. They are saying the company is closing. Where is Blair? She is in the green room, I said. My father looked at me. His eyes were red. Did you know? He asked. Did you know this was going to happen? I looked at him. I loved him. I really did. But I saw him clearly now. He was a weak man who had let his vanity over his brilliant younger daughter consume his duty to his older one. Yes, I said. I knew. He recoiled. You knew? And you didn't warn us? I warned you for years. Dad, I said, I told you she was dangerous. I told you she was hurting me. You told me to be quiet. You told me to be the bigger person. So you destroyed her? He shouted. You destroyed your sister to prove a point? I reached into my purse. I had 2 copies of the evidence. I pulled out the second set. I handed it to him. Read it, I said. He looked at the papers. He saw the scope document. He saw the credit line details that I had pulled from the public lien records, the ones that showed they had signed the house over not just for business capital, but to cover Blair's personal overspending in the first year. She didn't just borrow for the company. Dad, I said softly, she borrowed for the lifestyle. She spent your equity on the appearance of success before she had the reality of it, and she paid a consultant to make sure I never found out. He stared at the lien document. His hands started to shake. She told us it was for operations, he whispered. She said it was a bridge loan. It was a vanity loan, I said, and she bet your retirement on the idea that I would never stand up for myself. My mother looked at the papers over his shoulder. She let out a low moan. Sadie, she said, looking at me with pleading eyes. But the house, we have nowhere to go. I know, I said, and I am sorry. I truly am. But I couldn't set myself on fire to keep you warm anymore. You are cruel, my mother spat. The pleading turned to venom instantly. You are cold and cruel. How can you stand there and watch us fall? Because you watched me fall for 33 years and you never caught me. I said, I stepped back. Good luck, Mom. Good luck, Dad. I hope she was worth it. I walked away. They screamed my name. They called me selfish. They called me bitter. They called me everything Blair had paid $12,000 to make people believe I was. But their words didn't land. They passed through me like wind through smoke. I walked out of the museum doors and into the parking lot. The night air was biting, cold and clean. The city sounded different. It sounded vast. I walked to my car. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys. I had to crouch down on the asphalt to pick them up. I stayed there for a moment, crouching in the dark, between a Lexus and a Mercedes. I wasn't triumphant. I didn't feel like a hero in a movie. I felt gutted. I felt like I had just amputated a limb to stop gangrene from spreading. It hurt. It hurt more than I could have imagined. I was grieving the family I wished I had, the sister I wished loved me, the parents I wished protected me. But the gangrene was gone. I stood up, I unlocked my car, I sat in the driver's seat, I took my phone out. I had 14 missed calls from Blair, 7 from my mother. I opened the contact for Blair. I scrolled down to the bottom. Block caller. I opened the contact for Mom. Block caller. I opened the contact for Dad. Block caller. The silence in the car was sudden and absolute. I opened my messages. I found the thread with Arthur Keene. I typed 2 words. Proceed. I hit send. Arthur would file the final dissociation papers in the morning. He would ensure the trust was fully severed from luminosity. He would handle the legal fallout. I put the phone down. I put the car in gear. I didn't look back at the museum. I didn't look back at the ruin of the empire built on my back. I drove toward the highway. I didn't know exactly where I was going. Maybe I would go home. Maybe I would drive to the coast. Maybe I would just drive until the tank was empty. For the first time in my life, the destination didn't matter. I was driving my own car. I was burning my own gas. And the road ahead was terrifying, empty, and mine. Thank you for listening to this story. It was a journey into the shadows of family loyalty and the breaking point of silence, and I hope Sadie's choice resonated with you. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please leave a comment and let me know which part of the world you call home. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, retribution, and the quiet power of truth. And please, share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Sadie was right to pull the lever, or was the cost to her parents too high? I read every comment and can't wait to hear your perspective. Until next time.